Welcome back to the Change Physician Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa Cady, joined by my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, and we're joined by our special guest, Dr. Kaleb Redden, who's an orthopedic surgeon in Boise, Idaho. So thanks for joining us today.
You bet. It's a pleasure to be here. And just a clarification, so I'm non-op, so I'm a sports medicine guy, and I work in orthopedics, but I don't do surgery anymore. Yeah, part of the Change Physician, right? So making sure that you do the job that you want to do that fulfills you. So yeah, non-op.
Yeah. Well, you're very muscular. You have that orthopedic surgeon kind of look. So
yeah, the joke is, right? The joke is, if you want to be an ortho, the first question in the interview is how much you bench.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, awesome. Well, speaking, you being in the medical field, we have to start from the very beginning. And, what was it that drew you into the medical field in the first place?
My love of science and anatomy, biomechanics. I was definitely not a traditional medical student. That is for sure. So I grew up in a tiny little town where you can make a lot of money and have a great life with no education. And that's a rarity, right, in our world. But a lot of the people in my hometown stay in my hometown and work because there's a lot of oil and gas and ranching and a very traditional lifestyle there. And my parents told me that if I wanted to go to college, that I was absolutely, they wanted me to do that if that was my dream. But neither one of them had a bachelor's degree. They both were hardworking people. My dad has an associate's and my mom has an associate's, but that was it. And so I was the first one in my family to even consider going to get a bachelor's degree, of all my cousins and at that time, aunts and uncles, everything. And I actually went to, I was working in the oil and gas industry through high school, worked on ranches through high school. And when I finished, I wanted to play sports. I love sports. So I thought maybe I would try to do that. I had no idea that to play football, I wanted to play football. I had no idea you had to apply and go to spring ball and all these things before the year was over. So I missed tryouts my freshman year. I went to Montana State, did mechanical engineering because I had a mechanical inclination. I was good with my hands, understood how tools worked, and thought that would be a great fit for me. It was not. I failed miserably, landed right on my face. I had a great experience. I learned a lot about life, but I sucked at school. So mechanical engineering, not the place for me. I dropped out. Wow. So I dropped out of school. I went back to the oil patch because that's what I knew. That's what I was good at. I worked for about 3 years, learned a lot about life, got a lot bigger, continued to lift weights, eat healthy, got stronger, decided, you know what, now that I understand how the world works a little bit better, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and try this again. Went to Utah State, got in touch with the coaches, got in touch with the team, found out that, yeah, hey, you can come and be a walk-on. Here's the tryout date. And I felt like I had a pretty good chance of playing ball. Right before spring ball, I broke my back. And so I had a pars defect and a disc that ruptured. I have a L6, so translational, anatomy. So kind of predisposed me to some injury. And I fractured it and I herniated the disc bad enough that I got a foot drop, had to have surgery and lost 50 pounds. So I'm walking in and they're like, hey, man, that whole preferred walk-on thing is off the table now. Wow. So I was pretty devastated. I didn't really know what to do. And that's at that point, I had a couple of interventions in my life. I don't want to overshare too much, but I had some real problems with substance abuse because I was a lost person. I had lost my identity. I didn't know what to do with my life anymore. And I was depressed. And I met a few surgeons during that time frame, one that was working on my knee, one that was working on my back, one that was working on my shoulder, one that was trying to get me back on track. And I went to school still. I went to Utah State and I just kind of bounced around. I didn't know, maybe I did exercise science because that's what I loved, but I didn't really have a career path. And along the line, these doctors were influencing me to make better choices, number one, to find productive outlets for my anger, my depression, and to get myself back on track. I ended up becoming an athlete still. I walked onto the cheerleading team of all things and got a full ride scholarship for that, which would have been better than a football scholarship. Wow. And ended up being a full-time athlete, full-time student. And along the way, about my senior year, I had a meeting with Dr. Trek Lyons, who is now my partner and sits in that desk right next to me, my mentor. And he said, hey, why don't you become a sports medicine doctor? You understand athletes. You know what it's like to be an injured athlete. You know what it's like. You understand biomechanics. And at that point, I'd been doing really well in school. So I went from being sort of a mediocre student at best to being a really quite good student because I was learning about things I enjoyed and loved: anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, biochemistry, ate it up. ended up having great grades, and I got a degree in chemistry and exercise science. And he said, hey, you ought to throw your hat in the ring. And of course, at that point, I'm still thinking, man, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a blue collar, roughneck kid from a small town. I'm a meathead. You know, I'm not a genius like you, right? Like, I'm not a smart guy. He's like, listen, it takes a lot more to be a doctor than just grades. And you have a lot of life experience and a resume that's 3 pages long of extracurricular activities. Like, I think you'd relate to people really well. And he's like, it takes a certain type of doctor to be a sports medicine doctor. Like, you kind of have to understand that lifestyle, that walk. And so I graduated and went back to the oil patch. At that point, I had 2 kids, I had 2 boys, was married, was back in the patch because I couldn't make money doing anything with an exercise science degree. Worked for a year and decided, you know what, I'm going to try it. So I applied to med school and was accepted to both an MD and a DO school. Decided DO school was a route for me because I wanted to learn and keep my manipulation skills up. I wanted to learn more about the musculoskeletal system. And I got to school and it was just, it was no holds bar at that point. I started a sports medicine club, and, the rest is history. That was my one track. I knew that's exactly what I wanted to do. And once I found that direction, then it was like I ate it up. I struggled with all the other things in medicine that you have to learn about that weren't really up my alley, like pathology and pathology is probably my least favorite of all the medicine stuff that I learned about. But you get through it, right? And that's kind of my non-traditional path. So a very blue collar, it comes from very humble, meager circumstances to being, and using hard work and determination and belief. I really do feel like that belief can change your destiny. And you're not a product of your circumstances, you're a product of your choices. And that's kind of my non-traditional route to being into medicine.
Yeah. Just curious, what age were you when you went into medical school?
27, I think.
Okay.
27, 28. Yeah.
Yeah. A little bit later on.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin, I don't want to steal all the questions.
I was just going to make a comment on that because DO schools on average typically have an older student population. And just kind of going off topic a little bit here, it's always interesting to me in my class, the oldest person I think was like 40 something. And, it makes it provides a diversity, which I think is really interesting. And just like you were saying, there seems to be sort of this difference in life experiences. Not that there's any, I don't know, I'm not going to do the MDDO thing, whatever, but there's definitely, there's just something different about the people that are going in, which is kind of.
Right, wrong, or indifferent. There's no one better than the other. But I did find that because I had a bunch of friends in, through medical school and through undergrad that had gone to medical school, and our training, I had one friend that went to Duke, and one went to Baylor, and another one that went to DO school in Kirkland. And, it seemed like our books were the same books. In fact, I had some of the same professors that had moved schools from some of these other guys, like same books, same anatomy, same basic science, but just sort of the emphasis was just a little bit different than sort of the things that they were learning. I didn't get as much research opportunity, but I got a lot more hands-on stuff. And so totally think that both are awesome. I don't think one's better than the other. And honestly, I went to an MD residency and an MD fellowship. So, I don't really tote myself as being, different than any of my other MD counterparts. I feel like we're all kind of in the same bag, but yeah, and I think the oldest guy in my class was like 46. He'd been an engineer for a whole career and decided that he just wanted to do something different, and they gave him a shot. He did a great job. So
yeah, it's interesting. One of the years below us had someone that's 50 years old. It happened to be one of my mom's friends.
Wow.
So she's on her like 4th degree. But also I had been accepted like you into an MD school, University of Texas, Houston. And, you talk about choices, and I had a choice as well. And it was just that manual in a very athletic background, and just found it very intriguing. And so I just hopped into that. But, I feel the same way. The individual determines how they manifest the knowledge that they acquire through whatever route it is. So don't, for those listening, it's not better, one's better than the other. You have to look at the whole person and how they incorporate that into their practice.
Absolutely. 100%. And I think a lot of it came down to location for me too, because I was a dad, I had 2 kids. I came from a state where there isn't a medical school. Wyoming I didn't have residence for any place. I went to school at Utah State, but University of Utah, where the med school is there, didn't give me any. I wasn't a resident, right? I still had my Wyoming residency, so I was still an out-of-state student for them. So I didn't have that in-state, drive or drag that they have for certain schools. So I was kind of a man without a country, really. And so I wanted to go somewhere as close to home as I could be, so that my kids still could have a relationship with their grandparents and their cousins. And I didn't want to move them all around the country. And I actually did this thing where once I sort of understood how medical school worked, first and second year, third and fourth year residency, I knew I had to do a fellowship. How does this work? Okay, so you're telling me I'm going to have to move to do these audition rotations and then this match and da-da-da-da-da. I started thinking, gosh, if I could go somewhere to do my clinical rotations and then had a chance to get a residency and then they had a fellowship, man, I'd be able to keep my family in the same place. And so that happened for me way before I even got accepted. I looked at the schools that had rotation sites in places where I wanted to live, where I could train and get my fellowship done. And so, man, my school that I got to go to was the top of my list just because of that pathway. So it was a blessing. I know it was a pipe dream to hope for those things to all line up. Cause you guys both know it's rare to be able to do that, but I was able to do all of my clinicals, my residency and my fellowship all in one place. So my family didn't have to move around a lot. And that made a big difference to me too when I maturated into school.
Yeah. You prioritized your family. I mean, that's kudos to you. I mean, you're able to do that.
Yeah, that's always been one of the things that I've told people, that in the medical field, and it's really refreshing to talk to you guys like this, because most of the time I have these podcast interviews there with non-medical people. So I'll say things that really don't mean anything to these other folks, but like, you understand that medicine in general can take more than you can give. And oftentimes we as physicians use our job as our calling in life. And so your entire world revolves around your career. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But for me, it was not my calling in life to be a doctor. My calling is to be a daddy. My calling is to be a spouse for my wife, and my career comes second. And so I've always really tried to prioritize that as much as I can. And obviously there's times I failed dismally and the job took over, and 30-hour shifts and weeks on end without days off, and it wasn't optimal, but it was always in my heart that the job is second to my family. And I think that's what's made me so successful at my job, because I don't get quite as wrapped up when things don't go right.
That's a super healthy attitude, and it's a different focus. Because speaking as a parent myself, like I have 2 kids. We had kids. I actually met my wife in medical school, but we had kids during internship and residency, and it is so easy to lose that, to be consumed by the job. Like, because as you were saying, like, and we've talked about this with multiple other guests, and it's like you sort of have this plan. You go into medical school, and then something happens. But you don't really know what medicine is like until you are in medical school. Like, I don't care what anybody says. Oh, I've done this. I mean, I shadowed some guy for like 2 years and did all this stuff. And you don't know until you're in it. You just don't know. And so being able to keep your head above water and to focus on your family through that process. And because I see people struggling, we struggled. I know people who've had kids out, once they finish residency, and then they're trying to juggle this thing, because now they have this whole career thing, and then they're trying to figure out where the kids fit in. And if you just really have to know what your priorities are. So it
is really hard to juggle all those things. I mean, thankfully for me, like, my life has always been daddy. Like I worked away from home on the rigs for months, and my family lived in Logan, and I drove back and forth on my days off, and only got like 4 days off a month. So, I worked away from home. I understood what it was like to not be able to see them. We learned how to communicate through FaceTime. I learned how to work long hours. I learned how to be tired and still productive. And, I learned how to have really high quality and low quantity time with my kids before I even went to med school. And then our last daughter was born before we went. And so I didn't have to worry about, thankfully my wife was a great mom. She knew how to take care of all the things that, when I wasn't around, she could do it all by herself. And so I feel like that's a really stressful thing. And having kids in residency or in fellowship, I think would have been even harder than what I did having him before, because gosh, there's so many things that you learn. It's like drinking out of a fire hydrant, man. Like, you know, I mean, as a new parent in residency, when you're already low on sleep, and then you're like, now I got to do this and this with this kid. Like, yeah, oh, gosh. Yeah, that I feel like that would have been even harder than what I had to do.
Yeah, it seems like, you know, ironically, the medical system is not focused on wellness and doesn't prioritize other things. And, you know, being a female, you know, I'll just make a pitch here. I'm 46 and I've put off kids because I've been so focused on my career. And, you know, it wasn't a priority because I was so focused on trying to do a good job on what we were expected to do. And, you know, it's not necessarily an excuse, but there are so many things that in the medical field, you don't realize how intense the focus is on just the work at the exclusion of everything else until you're in it. So I think we all feel that.
Yeah, that's a really tough thing. I had a really good friend in residency who wanted to have a baby, and I can remember just seeing how poorly she was treated because they were like, well, if you have a baby, you know, you're going to be out on your internal medicine rotation, which means someone's going to have to cover for you. And, you know, who's going to take the 24-hour call shifts? And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm going to keep the derogatory things that I said down, but man, we let them have it. Like we stood up for her big time. Was like, look, she's got every right to do whatever she wants with her life. And this does not take priority over her having a baby. But you're right. There's like this level of expectation that, whether it's said or unsaid, it's the culture of medicine that is absolutely not focused on our wellness. Some of the most unhealthy people I've ever met have been the folks, you know, with MD and DO behind their name.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Kevin?
So moving into that a little bit more, then you were pretty focused going into medical school because you had this background. Was there any turning point when you got into either medical school, residency, fellowship, where you're like, something's wrong here? Like just something doesn't seem right with the fit? Or were you like, or were you so grounded when you came into it that you didn't have some of the struggles that some of us did when we're like, wait a second, what the hell did I sign up for?
No, I did. I think medical school, I was okay because I knew the direction that I wanted to go. I was super grateful to be there. I felt like I'd won the lottery, right? Like I showed up early every day, stayed late every night. I already had this sort of mature, that's probably not the right term, because if you ask my wife, I am far from mature, but maybe more of a focused approach. I knew what I needed to do, right? I knew that I needed to get up early, get there on time, work my ass off, stay there, stay engaged. There was no partying for me. I had a family to take care of. I didn't need to go out and find friends. I sort of had it all grounded. I would get up early, go to school, study. I'd take off at lunch, go to the gym, work out, come back, study, go home, have dinner with my family, come back, study till midnight, go back the next day. I'd take 4 hours off on Sunday for church and family time. And that was kind of my whole first and second year of med school. I did the first test block, though. I got kicked in the teeth because I was like 2 full days, 8 hours of tests. Are you kidding me? Like, that's like my entire undergrad experience all wrapped up into one test block, you know? So I definitely had to, I had to make some modifications on how I studied and the way I studied. I have a bit of a learning disability with reading. I don't read very well. It's not dyslexia, but it's a form of dyslexia. I have a hard time with processing reading. So I learned how to listen to lectures and had a friend, 2 buddies I studied with, that they would read it and then explain it back to me. And then we would, you know, I found ways to help them. And it worked pretty well, but I did okay through medical school because I always knew that, you know, just going to learn all this material and eventually I'm going to be doing this material is going to help me into the career field that I want. But I'll tell you, I realized something was wrong when I was an intern, and I knew I didn't want to deliver babies for a living, right? So like I knew I wanted to be a sports med guy. Like, why are you having me do these months and months and months of OB-GYN? Like, that's not what I'm set on this earth to do. I couldn't even be in the room for my own kids being born. I mean, I missed the first one. I was on a drilling rig. I passed out for the second one, and the third one, they had to hold my hand till I cut the cord. I was like a limp fish. It was a bad experience. Like, ask my wife; she'll tell you I was a shitty husband at the birthing suite. I sucked at it. Those are my own flesh and blood, you know. So then they're telling me, you're going to be on OB for the next, 6 weeks, and I'm like, okay, hold on, what? So that was a problem for me. Learning how to navigate the requirements of medicine. It's these boxes that they put us in, right? So like, you're going to do it this way, even though you're not going to use that outside, and you know what you want to do, right? Like, some people don't know what they want to do still. They get to the end of their residency and they're still like, well, I guess I'm not really sure yet what I'm going to do. Those people, it's a good idea to kind of see a little bit of everything. But that was hard for me, learning how to do things that I didn't feel like were right. Didn't feel like were, it wasn't like that I had a moral issue with it, but I had an internal conflict with delivering babies and taking care of OB patients. I'm glad that I learned a lot about what I did. Is I used it as an experience to learn about the physiology and how to help people work out when they're pregnant, what type of injuries they have, what can you do when they're pregnant. Like, I learned how to use it as, I'm going to see pregnant athletes someday. Let me learn how to deal with a pregnant athlete. Mm-hmm. But I just had to, in fact, I had so much PTSD after residency from my OB-GYN experiences. It was ridiculous. I went to therapy. I had to be on medication for a while. Cause I had a couple of really, really bad experiences, a few losses with moms and a few losses with babies that, traumatized me to no end. And that was the part where I was like, man, this is way more than I signed up for. It's not what it's cracked out to be. And the amount of time spent away from home, like, just, it's incredible. Like, yeah, you work 80 hours a week, but then you've got didactics and lectures that you're studying for, board exams you're studying for, committee meetings you've got to go to, then you're prepping for, after boards, you're prepping for fellowship interviews, and like there's just no end to it. And that was definitely, your question was there a point where I was like, hey, there's something wrong here? Like, yeah, it was like, about halfway through intern year when I hit that first OB rotation.
Yeah, I really want to expand a little bit, because not everyone brings this up, and especially some of the times this country is going through, it's just the counseling and the things you went to pursue because of the exposures to losing patients. And that's something that we don't capture a lot in the physician realm, that many of us feel like we're on an island. I've had to, withdraw care in the surgical ICU at times in the past, and had no attending around to help me with just the emotional aspects to it. I'm a pretty stoic person when it comes to dealing with it, and I see it as a challenge, but at the same time, your heart goes out to the people that are suffering and losing their loved ones. And did you have people around you? Because I think the medical system does a really poor job as a whole on really supporting physicians through some of these traumatic events, because we just have to get up and keep moving. Was there a support system there for you?
Yeah, it's that's spot on. I had a co-resident who's kind of built like me, humble kid, farm kid, spent 10 years in Iraq as an army guy. And there was one day where I sort of had like I was sitting in our residency office and I was crying, and he came in, he's like, dude, we're both meatheads, lift weights.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't go back to the hospital. Like, I can't go back over there. And he's like, what's wrong? And I told him what had happened. And he was like, he had experiences with PTSD from war. And so he just kind of sat and talked to me for a minute about it. And he was like, I think you need to talk to, we had a clinical psychologist who was in part of our residency. And he's like, and she's awesome, love her. He's like, you should just call her and just talk to her. Don't just talk to her. And I was like, okay. So I called her and I said, hey, I'm not doing really very good. She's like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, well, I mean, if the window is open, I'd jump out of it right now, kind of a thing. Yeah, wow. I was joking with her, but at the same time, I was real serious. Like, I'm in a real bad place, and I've got 18 hours left of my 24-hour call shift, and I don't know how I'm going to get through it. And so she basically kind of went above and beyond. She, my program really helped me at that point. I let my attendings know I was struggling, and you still have to go do the work. So I still was required to get up and go to work. I didn't shirk my duties, but I started having phone calls with her, and I went and saw her in the office a few times. And I think without having her being part of our program, I would have been in really bad shape, because there were days where I was like, I'd be in the shower and I'd have like this flashback, and I would end up on the floor in the shower crying, like not knowing what to do. And I didn't feel like I could talk to my wife about it, because it just didn't seem right to bring her into my pain, and I can't really explain it to her. She doesn't understand. I felt really alone, but if it wasn't for my co-resident understanding what type of problem I was having, like he knew I was in big trouble, and because he'd been there, and then him helping me get in to see our psychologist, I think that was a real saving grace for me. That's pretty much what got me through. But the truth is, like, they say things like, if you need help, if you need a personal day, if you need, here's the suicide hotline, give them a call. At the end of that conversation, they're going to be like, okay, well, you're good, right? You're heading into shift today, right? You're not going to miss today, right?
Yeah.
Like, the work got to go on. Like, you have these traumatic experiences, and you lose somebody in the ER, and you're running a code, and they lose, and you lose, and you go out and tell the family what had happened, and then you're expected to go and see the next patient who's got otitis media in the room next door, and have this happy face on and act like nothing's wrong, and you become kind of cold and callous so that you can get through the job. But then in your quiet time, then the demons come back in, and at least for me, like, I was able to hold it together around people, but then when I was alone is when it would all kind of come shattering down.
I just want to say one last thing, Kevin, with this, is that there's this perception that physicians are almost superhuman, or that they don't falter, or that they're supposed to be perfect. And I think we embrace that as physicians to the extent to our own demise. With 400 physicians committing suicide every year, this is like no joke. There's so much pain that we have to endure, or we stuff down below the surface, that despite the fact that there's resources out there, there's something that I think within us. To ask for help is one of the hardest things, because I think we're expected to always help others. And I think, I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that. I think it's really critical for people to hear, especially physicians, that you have to speak and talk about the pain you're having, because underneath it all, the severe depression and the suicide, there's some kind of pain with it under the surface. And those that have addictions, it's not about the addiction, it's about the pain. It's about what's under the surface, what is creating that need to cope in some other way. So I think, what I really wanted to just strike home is that we can be human, and it's okay for us to reach out for help. And luckily for you, you had someone that was able to see that, go beyond just the facade, and knew you and cared enough about you to kind of push you in that direction. Kevin?
Yeah, I was really grateful for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just made me because I was a military physician, and you hit the nail on the head too, because you have military members of PTSD, and they have this difficulty communicating with family members or whatever, and well, just talk to me. You can't talk about this stuff unless you could, but you just don't feel like you can talk about it unless you've experienced it. And medicine is such a similar way. Like, I'm just thinking about, like, you can just see your face, and it made me immediately flash to 3 cases that I will never ever forget. And yeah, so I guess for the listeners out there, and thanks for Kaleb for bringing this up, is just to remember that, to support each other, and that if you see one of our, because I think you're lucky also on your residency or fellowship.
Oh yeah.
Because there's some residencies that, I've seen people who are isolated and there's no one talking to them, and the only people who really can or have the chance to reach out to is their colleagues. So yeah, that's well, with this one in different places.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, that's probably not what you
good.
guys had planned, but yeah, no, that's not something I've actually talked about at all with anybody. Other than just those people. Like, I haven't had an opportunity to talk about it, in this way at all. And now that I'm just kind of thinking about it, yeah, I really am grateful in a lot of ways that, number one, we had a clinical psychologist that was someone I trusted. That's a huge thing. You got to be able to trust them. The fact that I, had someone who cared enough about me to say, I'm not just going to blow this off and let you just keep going like this. And it went both ways. Like, he had a baby the start of our second year, and his baby was born premature, was in the NICU, and I covered all of his shifts for that month. So I was on call Q3, and I was pretty rough, but I told him, dude, I would, you run down that foxhole, I'm following you back. Like, we had that relationship, and I don't know that everybody does, but him and I are really, we're grateful for each other, and we kind of made it through, you know, not unscathed, but without him, I think I would have been in bad shape. So, you know, I think a big part of being a physician is understanding how to communicate, right? Like that's your job all day long, is to talk to people and communicate with people and read signals. And all too often we sort of don't key in on the people sitting next to us. We're so focused on the people that are across from us. And so, you know, it's important to build those relationships with your colleagues, and then to keep your eyes open, and as someone who's been in those shoes, like offer help, and then, you know, be willing to accept the help, because yeah, there's definitely it's a rough situation to be in, but there's a way out, that's for sure.
Yeah, it really reminds us, this theme always seems to be coming up, Kevin, this collaboration and lifting each other up, and you know, no more of this, you know, siloed, you know, just doing things on your own and competing against others. This is you know, we really should be in this together, and you know, and in the end we all end up winning, including the patients. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity to share it. Hopefully that story helps somebody else. You know, like it would be the only good that comes from it is if it blesses somebody else's life. So grateful for the opportunity to share it.
Yeah. You know, speaking of, we have to get into this other realm of fitness, because I can say that I've been accused, even in medical school, and you can tell me if this has been your experience, that, you know, they're so busy that they don't have time to work out. And I'm like, I can't go without working out, especially if it's this stressful. Like for me, it was like a release. It was so much fun to like see how your body changes and how you can direct that. And I don't know, there's so much gratification from it. So how did you use your fitness throughout this medical career, and then how did it morph? Despite your body morphing, how did it morph as far as that played?
No, you're right. It absolutely has too. Like, and you're so right. Like people, oh, I don't have time to work out. Like, how do you function? Like, I mean, people would always make the accusations of me, like, oh, you should be reading more journal articles, or, oh, you should be going to more journal, you know, that was the big thing for me, is like, you should be doing more research, or you should be going to journal clubs, instead of spending that hour and a half a day at the gym every single day. You know, like, you can work out once in a while, you're fine. It's not like going for a run. It's not like going for a bike ride. Like, not quite the same. But yeah, and then there was I had to overcome the stigmas, you know, of being just my first internal medicine rotation in residency. One of the comments, because you always get, you know, every week or every month, whatever, you get these evaluations on what you're doing wrong, and, oh, hey, you're doing fine in these areas, but make sure you do better here. One of the comments was, well, apparently he is more than just a bunch of myocytes. There is a cerebrum there that is functioning, and he actually is a smart guy. Yeah, he works hard. He's okay. He's not, you know, he's not just a bunch of myocytes. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? Like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I like to lift weights and I've got some muscle, but there's more to me than just that. And that's not entirely what I spend my life doing. I mean, I spend an hour a day, and you think about that in a 24-hour period, how much of that time do you spend doing nothing that's benefiting you in your life, like watching Netflix or reading some romance novel or whatever? Like, you know, I chose to focus my time and my intensity and my energy into things that were going to value my life and my end direction. I don't want to tread water, right? I want to look at that seashore or wherever, that bank that I'm headed towards, and everything I do is want to push me towards the end of that, you know? And so I knew that working out was never going away from me. I had to find creative ways to get it in. You know, there on a 24-hour call shift, I wasn't going to the gym, but I would do stairs and I would find heavy things to lift, and I would just change my scrubs when I was done. Like, if I got a page in the middle of my workout, I just left and would come back afterwards. Like, you can always find time to work out. It's whether or not you want to. You have to make the time. And anything that's important to life, you will make the time for it. Either that or you'll make an excuse. I can't find the time or whatever. Like, so I always felt like the people that said that, it's not that they didn't have the time. It's just that they didn't want to dedicate the time to it. They had priorities elsewhere. And my fitness definitely did. My level of fitness changed. I went from being an athlete, a pretty strong guy when I hit med school, to being mediocre, mediocre there towards the end of the second year. Definitely not as much time spent. I was listening to Gouillon and Pathoma, lectures as I was working out. I wasn't listening to music. Doing flash colors on the treadmill when I was training. But I always lifted weights at least 5-6 days a week. And then as I got into the end of my fourth year, you realize fourth year is once you've matched in residency, it's kind of a cakewalk through the last few months. And so I really kicked it up a few notches into my fourth year, did a couple of bodybuilding competitions and did really well. And then residency again, intern year, slowed way down. Had a shoulder surgery, that slowed me way down. Had a hip surgery, that slowed me way down. But I keep having these this recurring theme in my life of, ebbs and flows of being at a certain level of fitness that I'm really thrilled about. And then having a big event like a board exam or having a big event like a shoulder surgery or whatever. It's become this kind of lifelong journey for me of, ups and downs and being really sort of happy with where I'm at and then feeling like I've got a long way to go still and kind of back and forth. But I absolutely love the way that exercise changes the human physiology and the, mental capacity. And I see the benefits from it every day. I see the benefits in my patients. I had a guy the other day came in that we're like, I'm like, listen, you're going to have a knee replacement if you don't lose 150 pounds. And and even then you can't do the surgery until you lose 100 pounds. Your BMI is too high. It's like, well, how am I going to do that? I don't have time to work out. I'm like, sit down, sit down. I'm going to tell you how you got time. And so I basically wrote out his day for him. We ironed it out every 15 minutes and said, this is what you do in a 24-hour period. These are the 15-minute increments that we can make modifications and become more efficient with these things that are required of you to be done. Here's what you're going to eat every day. And here's what you're going to do in the gym every day. It took me 30 minutes. I was like, bam. He came back and saw me 3 months later. He lost 15 pounds. And he's like, hey, man, it really works. I'm like, yeah, I know. Tell your friends. Come on.
That's awesome.
Well, let's move into that a little bit. I know we're running out of time here, but so you have had this fitness focus since before medical school. How have you, besides just this one example where you're actually incorporated into patient care, how are you pulling this into your life practice, what you're doing now, creating a fitness-based life or pulling it into in a meaningful way?
Yeah, I try to use nutrition and exercise as the cornerstone of every treatment plan that I write. Because in sports medicine, number one, either my patients are already very athletic and it's just adding to, and I'm basically a human performance specialist. So I'm helping them get from this level to this level, whether that's middle school to high school to the juniors, college to the pros to the Olympics, whatever it may be. Senior golfers, whatever, masters tennis, like I'm helping athletic people and I'm a human performance specialist. So I take the real world applicable knowledge that I've learned over the 25 years of training, putting that into my medical practice. Like that's one part of it. The other part of it is taking the person who is not athletic, who's literally just there for orthopedics, knee pain, shoulder pain, elbow pain, back pain, neck pain, whatever kind of blank pain it is. And I use nutrition and exercise to help them improve their outcomes. And it's with every single patient. And that's where I start. Because I feel like in orthopedics, so much of what we do is band-aiding. And if we could actually change lifestyle modifications, we would have such better outcomes. And so I always start the conversation and I found a way to do it in a way that's not abrasive, not, it's not judgmental. It doesn't create any expectations. I use a modality called motivational interviewing, where I basically just let them tell me why they're having these barriers and let me tell them why it would be beneficial for them to have exercise. It's kind of like a Jedi mind trick, but it works amazingly well and people see the benefits from it. And then I don't have to be the one preaching to them. They're the ones preaching to me like, doc, I'm doing it. I'm losing the weight. And anybody can do it. I've got just as many patients in their 50s and 60s that are losing hundreds of pounds, over a year to 2 years worth, but they're losing the weight and they're not competitive bodybuilders or competitive powerlifters or in the Olympics. They're just people that are making everyday choices that lead to weekly choices, that lead to monthly and yearly choices, that lead to huge changes in their life.
Yeah.
I would never have thought I was going to hear an orthopod talk about motivational interviewing. So I just love
it. Sports medicine.
Oh,
that's I know you're gonna need to go here, but
the first patient just barely arrived, so I've still got 15 minutes. But yeah,
okay.
ready to go. We're doing okay.
Well, I think you are representing as a role model, the fact that you can just say, hey, I make some choices and I spend an hour a day for my health and fitness. And, because sometimes looking at you, they might feel like, oh, well, it's like they almost assume like you spend half your day, to create that when, in reality, it's awesome. You better eat your vegetables. That's right. But I think that's really powerful that you make it really clear. This is just a choice you made over the years, and it's just, a little bit every day, and that it's possible, and it doesn't have to be this huge, commitment for most of your day. So I think there's got to be, DocThor, as you have your hashtag, has this, I think, an impact on people that they believe it's possible.
Well, patients give me stuff like that all the time.
That's awesome.
I want to add on to it that because the difference is you've incorporated your training, your coaching, MI, and so you're not just giving people a bunch of information saying you need to, here's what you need to do. Like, here's the exercise, here's the diet plan. You're actually helping them to create a plan, which is not the same thing as giving them a handout or a packet of information. And I would, that's much more what we call education rather than information.
Huge. That's a very key point.
So, yeah, I mean, it's, hopefully someone's going to understand the difference there, because we think that we educate and we're just actually throwing out information patch.
Huge. And just to speak to that, number one, I'm the body that I have, people will say things like, I hear these comments all the time. Well, it's easy for you. You're fit. Okay. Pardon me, but that's bullshit. If I didn't do the work, I wouldn't be fit. Right. So it's not easy for me. It's hard for me, just like everybody else. I enjoy it. That may be different. I'm just an average guy with perhaps above average ambition, but I am committed. And that's important. Dedication and commitment and intensity outweigh motivation and inspiration 10 out of 10 times. You're going to wake up some morning, you're not going to have the motivation or the inspiration. Get up anyway. If you're committed, you'll do it. Consistency is the key. It's hard for everybody. Number two, I don't spend 6 hours in the gym every day. I spend an hour a day. Sometimes if I'm leaning out or I have an event coming up, or if there's something that's, above and beyond what I normally do, then I'll spend maybe 2 hours a day to get some extra cardiovascular work in, but I'm not spending 6 hours a day in the gym. So if I can do it as a physician, as a dad, and I've got 3 other jobs too, if I can do it, you can do it. I'm not special. And I make that point very clear with my patients. Like, they're looking at me like, oh, I can't do what you do. I'm like, yes, you can. Like, anybody can, and you can. And the other thing that I hear all the time is like, man, I wish I looked like you. And that is a compliment that I'm grateful and humbled for, but you can't look like me. Nobody can look like me. I look like me. That's it. Stop comparing yourself to me. You look like you. I look like me. You be the best version of you. I'll be the best version of me. Like, I make that linear line in the sand right away with my clients. Most of the clients that I have outside of medicine, the coaching, the personal training clients, I'm like, look, if you always are chasing this look of somebody else, you're never going to be happy with who you are in the mirror. Like, you have to be your biggest fan, your biggest critic, but you can't compare yourself to other people, because you just can't look like anybody else. Like, it's not going to work. I mean, I learned that lesson the hard way after years and years and years being like, man, why am I not a 300-pound monster? Why am I not a 300-pound monster? Like, I'm eating, I'm lifting, I'm doing all these things. I'm doing it for decades. Like, oh, it's because my DNA is not built to do that. Okay. Well, I'm going to be all right with being who I am, as big and as strong as I can be. Every day I do my best to be the best version of me. And you can do the same thing. So I tell people that all the time. Like, look, don't compare yourself to me. You be the best version of you. And you have to be happy with the progress. You can't expect perfection. So I think those are some key terms. Like, anybody can do it. It doesn't take a million hours. It does take commitment. You have to do the work. You can't just take a diet and exercise pill or read an article about it either. Like, you can't just hand somebody the information and be like, go take care of it yourself. And this is where I find, I've got my clinic, and then I've got physical therapy, right? So we work hand in hand with physical therapists all the time. They do an amazing job of rehabbing people, getting them back to being healthy. But then they're not really back like they get to a certain point and then insurance stops covering, or they've met their max, or the physical therapist says, well, you've worked to the end of our planning here. You're ready to go off and do this on your own now. People are kind of left like, well, I'm not where I want to be. Like, how do I get to where I want to be? And so I'm trying to bridge that gap between personal trainers, using personal trainers as an extension of the medical field, and coaches in a way. They're not all developed equally. They have to be the right type of person, and they have to be willing to learn and expand their knowledge as well. But a personal trainer that I'm working with to say, hey, look, this guy's got, FAI in his hip. He can't squat to depth, but he wants stronger legs. Let's work around these things. Let's use some BFR training. Let's use some high volume sets. Let's change his range of motion, get this guy stronger quads. That's the goal. So make sure the goal is a reasonable and a goal that's reasonable and achievable, lofty, but achievable. And let's work around and make modifications to achieve that goal. I think that a lot of times physicians will just say, well, you've got, in my field, you glute med tendinopathy, you got to strengthen your glute med, get out of here. Or you got patellofemoral syndrome, you got to strengthen your VMO, go see PT. They'll go see PT and they'll get them to where they're kind of pain-free, but they're not really bringing above and beyond, right? So I don't know. Those are things that I struggle with and try to work with in improving our field.
That's awesome. I love talking about this stuff. I'm just loving this interview. If people want to, you're doing a lot of things. So if people want to discover you, aside from the hashtag DocThor and your muscle doc handle, where would they find you for various things? What would you like to share?
I mean, truthfully, I've got a couple of things that I'm building that aren't yet ready to roll out. So right now what I'm doing is obviously the muscle doc _KR Instagram. I shouldn't say I don't have time, but I don't put any energy or time into Facebook or Twitter or any of the other modalities, YouTube. I find that I've got enough time for one social media outlet. So I use Instagram. And then, the hashtag DocThor, right? Yeah, that's funny. And then the gym that I work out at, the Mecca Gym in Meridian, Idaho, I'm the medical director for those guys. So their coaches basically work with me and their clients to find out what type of biomechanical problems their clients may have. And then if they get problems with weight loss or weight gain or strength gain, and the trainers are like, hey, can we get some input from you? I'll basically look at their programming, make modifications, make suggestions, do the labs, do the DEXA scans, do all the, the medical problem, fix the medical problems, and then turn them back over to the trainers. And I oversee the personal trainers. So folks that want to reach out and do, strength coaching or body composition changes or, those type of things, the Mecca Gym is a great place. And you can just tell them that DocThor sent you. If people want, I do a lot of like life coaching and stuff like this, and I think that the best way to get a hold of me there is just with my Instagram. I'm pretty choosy about who I work with, because I'm at this point in my life, I do two types of clients. I do one, the people who deserve the help. Like I've got a guy right now that's had a cervical spinal fracture that was paralyzed from the neck down from football. And the kid outworked his PT, astonished his neurologist, and they were like, look, we don't know how come you're doing so well. Get out of here. Like, you're an anomaly. And I've taken that kid under my wing, and he has been one of the most motivational, inspiring people I've ever worked with in my life. And so I benefit from working with him. So I don't charge that kid a dime. Like, I get paid by being around him. Like, his perseveration on positivity is palpable. I mean, it's just thick. And so I work with people like that I feel like need a little bit of an extra bump in an expertise that they're not going to find anywhere else. And that hopefully doesn't sound arrogant, but I realize that no one else can really help this guy. So I'm going to do it. And I benefit from being around him. So there's those type of clients. The other type of clients are people who are really committed, because it's not going to do you any good. It wastes your time. It wastes my time if you're not really committed. Right. So like, those are the things that I look for people, those stages of change, right? The pre-contemplation, contemplation, action, and regression, right? Like, I want to find those people that are in the contemplation stage. And so muscle doc _KR is a great way for people to reach out to me. And then at the Mecca Gym is where I can help people with like their training and stuff like that.
Awesome. Kevin?
I don't think I have anything else to add on that. I think we could talk for a long time. I mean, there were so many topics that I would love to go into a little bit more. So we'll probably have to pull you back in for a future episode there, DocThor.
You guys are awesome. I got to tell you, thank you so much for reaching out. Like it has been really just a choice experience for me to be able to sit and just communicate with like-minded people who are trying to help change the world, change the field that we're living in. And it's so refreshing to be able to communicate with someone who has that same understanding of the training and what it's like to get through it, and the job and what type of problems that brings. Because it's not that you want to complain about it. You don't want to complain, but you need to talk about it. Like, you need to be able to explain some of these struggles and trials, because we all face them, and there's not a good avenue for us that is reasonable and realistic to discuss it and improve those things. And it's okay to break the mold. It is okay to break the mold and to do whatever you want to do. Like, someone who gets burned out as a doctor, and I've got friends that are like that, man, change, do something different. Like, yeah, maybe you're not going from being an ER doc to being a neurosurgeon, but there's a lot of things out there that you can do that can make you happy. So be willing to create your own path. That's, I think, just hugely, and I think that's what you guys are all about, like making sure that you're following the path that's right for you.
Yep. Spot on.
Yeah, I can't add any more to that. So everybody else, thank you for joining us today on this episode of the Change Physician podcast. Thank you to our guest, Dr. Kaleb Redden. Fantastic talking to you. Everybody else out there, stay well, and make sure you visit thechangephysician.com. See you next time.
Changephysician.com. Thank you, guys. Take care.